My best friend got drunk at New Year's and said, "I need to tell you something about your husband." Then she passed out, and everyone suddenly wanted to leave. The party dissolved in 20 minutes. People grabbed coats and mumbled about babysitters, early mornings, things they'd forgotten. My husband kissed my cheek and went to bed around 2 a.m., oblivious. I sat on our couch surrounded by plastic champagne flutes, staring at Natalie sprawled across the armchair, her lipstick smeared. I should have woken her up, demanded answers. Instead, I let her sleep and spent the rest of the night Googling signs your husband is cheating. By dawn, I'd convinced myself of 15 different affairs. His secretary, the woman at the gym, that barista who always drew hearts in his foam. Natalie woke at 6 a.m., groaning. I told her what she'd said. The color drained from her face. She went very still. She claimed she was drunk and didn't mean it. She left before I could push harder. Over the next week, she dodged my calls. Her texts were brief and vague. Super busy at work. Feeling under the weather. My husband acted normal. Too normal. He worked late Tuesday like always. Golf Saturday morning like clockwork. But I started noticing things. How he angled his phone away when texting. How he showered immediately after the gym. How he'd lost 15 pounds and bought new cologne. 2 weeks after New Year's, I went to Natalie's office unannounced. I walked straight past her assistant into her corner office. When she saw me, her laugh died mid-sentence. She hung up the phone. I told her to tell me right now. She looked older suddenly, tired in a way that had nothing to do with hangovers. She said I wouldn't believe her. I told her to try. She pulled up something on her computer, hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. It was a Facebook message thread between her and someone named Mitchell Grayson. The first message was from 8 months ago. Your husband isn't who you think he is. I scrolled through months of correspondence. Mitchell claimed to be my husband's son from a relationship 19 years ago, before we'd even met. He had photos, documents, a birth certificate. His mother died last year and he'd been searching for his father ever since. Natalie explained that Mitchell contacted her through LinkedIn, thought she could help him reach my husband. She didn't tell me immediately because she wasn't sure it was real, so she hired a private investigator. She opened another folder. Inside were hospital documents, court papers from a paternity case settled out of court when the mother agreed to disappear in exchange for a lump sum, all signed by my husband. He paid her $50,000 to go away. She raised their son alone in Oregon until she died of cancer. Now the kid wanted to meet his father. I felt the room tilt. Mitchell had been emailing my husband for 6 months. My husband blocked him, so Mitchell started showing up at his office. Last month, my husband threatened a restraining order. I asked why she waited to tell me. She said she knew how much I wanted a baby, and she knew about the miscarriage. She didn't want to hurt me with news that he already had a child he abandoned, unless she was absolutely certain. We sat in silence. Finally, I asked if there was more. Natalie's expression changed. She looked frightened. She said Mitchell sent her something else 2 days ago, something she hadn't verified yet. Something that changed everything. She pulled up one more email but didn't turn it toward me. She said that before she showed me, I needed to understand that once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. My marriage, my entire life, it might all collapse. The office door opened. My husband stood in the doorway. He looked between us, his face unreadable. "How did you find me here?" he asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before an explosion. Natalie stood up. "I should go." "No," I said. "Stay." My husband stepped inside and closed the door. He looked at Natalie's computer screen, still displaying Mitchell's messages. Then he looked at me. His jaw tightened. "So now you know." Not a question, a statement. Like he'd been waiting for this moment for months, maybe years. I found my voice. "You have a son." He laughed. It was bitter and short. Had a son. Past tense. "I signed away my rights 19 years ago. Legally, he's nothing to me. He's 19 years old and his mother just died." My husband shrugged. "That's unfortunate. But it doesn't change anything. I made my choice before you and I even met. I was 22. Stupid. Not ready for a kid. I did what was best for everyone. You paid his mother to disappear. I gave her money to start over. She wanted it. She took it. Case closed. He's been trying to contact you for 6 months." My husband's face hardened. "And I've been ignoring him for 6 months. I don't owe him anything. His mother made her choice. I made mine. He needs to accept that and move on." Natalie finally spoke. "There's more. You should tell her the rest." My husband turned to her. His expression shifted into something I'd never seen before. Cold. Almost threatening. "You need to stay out of this." She didn't flinch. "She deserves to know everything." "Know what?" I asked. "What else is there?" My husband rubbed his face. When he looked at me again, his eyes were different. Resigned. "Fine. You want the whole story?" Mitchell's mother wasn't some random girlfriend. Her name was Claire. We dated for 3 years. I loved her. Was going to propose. He paused. Sat down in the chair across from Natalie's desk. Then she got pregnant. And I panicked. I was 22, broke, working a dead-end job. I wasn't ready. So I told her to get an abortion. She refused. We fought for weeks. Eventually, I gave her an ultimatum. The baby or me. She chose the baby. The room went silent. My husband stared at his hands. I walked away. Started over in a new city. Built my career. Met you. Thought I'd left it all behind. Then last year, Claire tracked me down through my company website. She was dying. Wanted me to know about Mitchell. Wanted me to be there for him after she was gone. I told her no. I told her I had a wife, a life, and I didn't want him in it. She died 3 months later. I felt sick. You knew she was dying, and you did nothing. He looked up. What was I supposed to do? Destroy our marriage over a kid I never wanted? Upend everything we built together? You could have told me. And then what? You would have insisted I meet him, help him, probably invite him into our lives. I know you. You would have made this into some redemption story. He wasn't wrong. Part of me would have. But hearing him say it like that, like my compassion was a character flaw, made something inside me crack. So Mitchell's been showing up at your office, I said, for 3 months straight, every Tuesday and Thursday, standing outside the building with a photo of his mother, just watching me. I had security remove him twice, filed for a restraining order last month. What happened with the restraining order? My husband's expression shifted again. That's the problem. The judge denied it. Said Mitchell had a right to try to contact his biological father, told me to handle it like an adult instead of hiding behind lawyers. So you're still ignoring him. What else can I do? If I give him an inch, he'll take everything. These kids always do. They show up with their sob stories and their dead mothers, and suddenly I'm supposed to play dad after 19 years? I stood up. My legs felt shaky. I need to go. My husband stood too. Where are you going? Home. I need to think. We need to talk about this. I think we've talked enough. I walked out of Natalie's office. My husband followed me to the parking garage, but I got in my car before he could say anything else. I drove home on autopilot, my brain struggling to process everything. When I got home, I went straight to our bedroom and opened my husband's closet. I'd never snooped before, never had a reason to. But now I pulled boxes down from the top shelf, went through jacket pockets, checked the pockets of pants he hadn't worn in months. In a shoebox tucked behind his winter boots, I found them. Letters. Dozens of them. All from Claire. The earliest ones were postmarked 18 years ago. The most recent was from 13 months ago, right before she died. I opened the most recent one. Her handwriting was shaky, harder to read than the earlier letters. She wrote about Mitchell, how smart he was, how he'd gotten into college on a full scholarship, how he looked just like my husband. She said she was dying and didn't have much time. She begged my husband to reconsider, to give Mitchell a chance, to not let their son spend the rest of his life wondering why his father never wanted him. At the bottom she'd written, I never asked you for anything after you left. I raised him alone. I worked 3 jobs to put food on the table. I did everything myself because you made it clear you wanted no part of us. But I'm asking you now, please don't abandon him again. He's a good kid. He deserves better than what you gave me. I found photos, too, tucked inside the letters, pictures of a little boy who grew into a teenager who grew into a young man. In every photo, he looked more and more like my husband. Same eyes, same smile, same way of standing with his weight on one leg. My husband came home around 8:00 p.m. He found me sitting on our bed surrounded by letters. He stopped in the doorway. You went through my things. You hid an entire person from me. He walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, I was protecting you. From what? From this. From all of this mess. You wanted a baby so badly. After the miscarriage, you were devastated. How was I supposed to tell you I already had a kid I wanted nothing to do with? By being honest. He shook his head. You don't understand. If I told you about Mitchell, you would have wanted me to reach out, to build a relationship. And then what? We play happy family with a kid I abandoned? He's not a kid anymore. He's 19, and he just lost his mother. That's not my fault, isn't it? You chose to walk away. You chose to pay his mother to disappear. You chose to ignore her letters for 18 years. You chose to ignore him when he finally reached out. My husband stood up. I'm not doing this. I'm not letting you guilt me into feeling bad about a decision I made 2 decades ago. I was young and scared, and I did what I thought was right. For who? For you? For all of us. Including Mitchell. What kind of father would I have been at 22? Broke, resentful, trapped. He was better off without me. That wasn't your decision to make alone. Yes, it was. It was my life, and it was his life too. And Claire's. My husband grabbed his jacket. I'm going to a hotel. We can talk about this when you've calmed down. I'm calm. No, you're looking at me like I'm a monster. Like everything we've built together means nothing because of one mistake I made 19 years ago. It's not the mistake that bothers me. It's the lying, the hiding, the fact that you threatened a restraining order against your own son. He's not my son. Biologically, maybe. Legally, no. I signed away my rights. That makes him a stranger. He walked out. I heard his car start in the driveway and then pull away. I sat alone in our bedroom until midnight, reading through Claire's letters. She never asked for money after that initial payment. Never threatened to tell anyone. Never tried to force my husband into Mitchell's life. She just wrote, once a year, around Mitchell's birthday, updating my husband on their son's life, how he'd learned to ride a bike, how he'd made honor roll, how he'd won the science fair, how he'd been accepted to college. My husband had saved every single letter, which meant some part of him cared, or at least felt guilty enough to keep them. The next morning, I called Natalie, asked for Mitchell's contact information. She hesitated, but eventually sent it. An email address and a phone number. I stared at them for an hour before finally writing an email. I introduced myself, told him I was his father's wife and I'd just learned about him. I said I was sorry for what he'd been through, sorry about his mother, sorry my husband had refused to meet him. Then I asked if he wanted to talk. He responded within 20 minutes. Yes. We met at a coffee shop the next day. I got there early, ordered a tea I didn't drink, and waited. When Mitchell walked in, I knew him immediately. He had my husband's walk, his build, his mannerisms. He sat down across from me. We stared at each other for a long moment. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "I know this is weird. It's definitely weird." He smiled. It was my husband's smile, crooked on one side. "I don't know what your dad told you about me," he said. "But I'm not trying to ruin his life. I just wanted to meet him, to know where I came from. He told me you've been showing up at his office." Mitchell winced. "Yeah, probably not my best strategy. But he wouldn't answer my emails or calls. What else was I supposed to do? I don't know. We talked for 2 hours. Mitchell told me about his childhood, how his mom worked constantly but always made time for him, how she never spoke badly about my husband, even though she had every reason to, how she got sick last year and fought as hard as she could, but the cancer spread too fast. He showed me pictures of Claire. She was beautiful. Dark hair, kind eyes, the kind of face that looked like it smiled often. She really loved him," Mitchell said, "even after everything. She said he was young and scared, and she didn't blame him for leaving. That's generous of her." She was generous. Sometimes too generous. She should have been angrier. He pulled out his wallet and showed me a photo. It was Claire and Mitchell at his high school graduation. They were both grinning, his arm around her shoulders. This was 2 years ago. She was already sick, but we didn't know yet. I'm glad we didn't know. We got to be happy that day. I felt tears building. "I'm sorry you lost her." "Me too." We sat in silence for a while. Finally, I asked what he wanted from my husband. Mitchell shrugged. "Honestly, I don't even know anymore. At first I thought I wanted a relationship, a real father. But after months of him ignoring me, I realized that's never going to happen. Now I just want answers. Why he left, why he never tried, why I wasn't worth fighting for." "You were worth fighting for," I said. "Your mother proved that." "I know, but it would be nice if my father thought so too." I drove home and found my husband's car in the driveway. He was in the living room, working on his laptop. He looked up when I walked in. "Where were you?" he asked. "Meeting your son." His face went pale. "You what?" "I had coffee with Mitchell. We talked for 2 hours. My husband closed his laptop. "You had no right to do that." "I had every right. He's part of your life whether you acknowledge it or not. And now he's part of mine." "No, he's not. You don't get to invite him into our marriage without my permission. Our marriage stopped being just ours the moment I found out you've been lying to me for 6 months. I haven't been lying. I just didn't tell you something that didn't concern you." "Didn't concern me? Your secret child doesn't concern me. He's not a child. He's a legal adult who needs to move on with his life and stop harassing me. He's not harassing you. He's grieving. His mother just died and he wanted to know his father. That's normal. Normal would have been coming to me privately, not stalking me at work, not contacting my wife behind my back. I contacted him, not the other way around." My husband stood up. "I need you to stay away from him." "No, I'm serious. This isn't your problem to solve. You're right. It's yours. But you're not solving it. You're hiding from it. What do you want me to do? Welcome him with open arms? Pretend the last 19 years didn't happen? I want you to be honest. With him. With yourself. With me. I have been honest. I told you I don't want a relationship with him. That's the truth. Why?" My husband's face changed. "Because I can't. Because looking at him is looking at every mistake I've ever made. Because he represents a version of my life I worked hard to escape. So this is about shame. This is about self-preservation." He walked out of the room. I heard him go upstairs and close the bedroom door. Over the next week, I met with Mitchell 3 more times. We had lunch, went for a walk in the park, talked about his plans for the future. He was studying engineering at Portland State, wanted to design sustainable buildings. He was smart, articulate, thoughtful, everything a parent would be proud of. Each time I came home, my husband grew more distant. He worked later, came to bed after I was already asleep, avoided conversation. Then one night he sat me down, told me I had to choose, him or Mitchell. I stared at him. "You're giving me an ultimatum. You're forcing me to. Every time you see him, you're choosing him over our marriage." "I'm not choosing anyone. I'm trying to help a grieving kid. He's not your responsibility." "Maybe not. But someone has to care about him since you won't." My husband's jaw tightened. "If you keep seeing him, I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air between us. "Then file," I said. He looked stunned. "You're serious? You're the one who gave me an ultimatum. I'm just calling your bluff." "I'm not bluffing." "Neither am I." We sat in silence. Finally, my husband stood up and walked out. He didn't come home that night, or the next. On the 3rd day, I got a text. "I'm staying at my brother's. I need time to think." I spent the next week in our house alone. During the day, I went to work, answered emails, attended meetings, pretended everything was fine. At night, I sat in our living room and wondered how we'd gotten here. Mitchell texted asking if I was okay. I told him my husband and I were having problems. He immediately offered to back off, said he didn't want to cause trouble in my marriage. I told him it wasn't his fault. My marriage problems existed long before I knew he did. Mitchell was just the catalyst that brought them to the surface. We met for coffee again. This time he brought a box. Inside were more photos of his mother, a journal she'd kept, some letters she'd written to my husband but never sent. "I thought you might want these," Mitchell said, "since he won't take them." I went through the box slowly. Claire had documented everything. Mitchell's first steps, his first words, every birthday, every milestone. In the margins, she'd written notes to my husband. Things like, "He has your laugh," or "He asks about you sometimes and I don't know what to say." One entry from 10 years ago read, Mitchell came home from school crying today. They did a family tree project and he was the only kid who had to leave half of it blank. I told him his father had his reasons for not being here, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. He asked if his father even knows his name. I lied and said yes. But I don't think you do. I don't think you've ever thought about him as a real person. Just a mistake you paid to disappear. I closed the journal. Mitchell was watching me. She was angry, he said quietly. She tried not to be, but sometimes it came through. She had a right to be angry. I know. But she also taught me not to hate him. She said hate takes too much energy and I should save mine for better things. She sounds like she was an incredible person. She was. I just wish he could have seen that. That night, I called my husband, asked him to come home so we could talk. He arrived an hour later. We sat in the kitchen, the same place we'd had 1,000 normal conversations over 8 years of marriage. I need you to read something, I said. I pushed Claire's journal across the table. My husband stared at it, but didn't touch it. I'm not reading that. You need to. You need to see what you walked away from. I know what I walked away from. I don't need a guilt trip. This isn't about guilt. It's about truth. You've spent 19 years convincing yourself you made the right choice. But you never faced what that choice actually meant. I faced it every day. Every time I thought about having kids with you and panicked. Every time you talked about being a mother and I wondered if I was capable of being a father. I've carried this with me every single day. Then face it now. Read the journal. Meet your son. Stop running. My husband shook his head. If I meet him, it opens a door I can't close. He'll want a relationship. He'll want me in his life, and I can't give him that. Why not? Because I don't know how. Because I'm terrified I'll fail him the same way I failed his mother. Because it's easier to be nothing than to be a disappointment. He stood up, paced the kitchen. You think I'm heartless, he said. You think I don't care. But the truth is, I care too much. That's why I stayed away. If I let myself love him, I'd have to face everything I missed. Every birthday, every milestone, every moment I should have been there and wasn't. That's too much regret to carry. So instead, you carry nothing. Instead, I survive. We stood in silence. Then my husband picked up Claire's journal and left. He took it with him when he went back to his brother's house. 3 days later, he called. Asked if I could arrange a meeting with Mitchell. I said yes. We met at a park on a Sunday afternoon. Neutral territory. My husband arrived first. He was wearing jeans and a sweater, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. When Mitchell walked up, my husband's breath caught. They stood 6 feet apart, staring at each other. Hi, Mitchell said finally. Hi. Silence. I stepped back, gave them space. They talked for over an hour. I couldn't hear most of it, but I watched their body language shift. At first, they stood rigid, arms crossed. Gradually, they relaxed, sat down on a bench. At one point, my husband put his head in his hands and Mitchell reached out like he wanted to comfort him but wasn't sure if he should. When I drove my husband home, he was quiet. We got inside and he sat on the couch, staring at nothing. He looks just like me, he said finally. I know. She did a good job raising him. She did. I read the whole journal, every entry. She loved him so much, and I missed all of it. He started crying. I'd never seen him cry before. Not when we lost the baby. Not when his father died. Not ever. I sat beside him and he leaned into me. We stayed like that for a long time. Over the next few months, things slowly changed. My husband started meeting Mitchell once a week. Coffee at first, then lunch, then longer conversations that stretched into dinners. They were careful with each other, tentative, like two people learning a new language. Mitchell told him about college, about his mother, about growing up feeling like half of him was missing. My husband listened, actually listened, didn't make excuses or defend his choices, just acknowledged the pain he'd caused. One night, my husband came home and told me he'd apologized to Mitchell. Really apologized. Told him he was wrong to walk away, wrong to stay away, wrong to threaten him instead of talking to him. He said Mitchell cried. They both cried. Are you going to keep seeing him? I asked. If he'll let me? I think he will. My husband nodded. Then he said something that surprised me. I want you to keep seeing him too. He needs people who care about him. And you're better at this than I am. So I did. Mitchell became part of our lives. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. He'd come over for dinner sometimes. We'd text about his classes or whatever movie he'd just watched. He started calling me by my first name instead of Mrs. followed by my husband's last name. My husband's relationship with him grew too, slowly. It wasn't a fairy tale reunion. There was too much hurt for that. But it was real. They talked about Claire, about the past, about what comes next. One Sunday, Mitchell brought over a box of his mother's things. Photos, jewelry, some of her clothes. He said he couldn't keep all of it in his dorm room and asked if we'd hold on to it. My husband went through the box carefully. He pulled out a necklace. Said he'd given it to Claire on their second anniversary. He'd thought she got rid of it after he left, but she kept it. Wore it in half the photos Mitchell had. He held that necklace for a long time. That night he told me he'd been thinking about the miscarriage. About how devastated we both were. He said maybe the reason it hurt so much was because he knew he'd already failed one child. He was terrified of failing another. I told him I understood. I did. But I also told him that fear couldn't control our lives forever. We started talking about trying again, not right away, but eventually. A year after I first met Mitchell, we celebrated his 20th birthday together. My husband, me, Mitchell, and a few of his friends from college. We had cake and too much pizza, and Mitchell laughed at something my husband said, and for a moment they looked exactly the same. Later, after everyone left, Mitchell pulled me aside, thanked me for everything, said he knew it wasn't easy, and he appreciated that I'd chosen to care about him even when I didn't have to. I told him I didn't choose to care about him. I just did. Because that's what happens when you get to know someone. They stop being an idea and become a person, and people are worth caring about. He hugged me. It was the first time he'd done that. My husband and I are still working through things. Some days are harder than others. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But we're trying. Actually trying. Not just going through the motions, but having real conversations about who we are and what we want our marriage to look like. Mitchell is part of that conversation now. He's part of our future. Not in the way things would have been if my husband had never left, but in a new way. A way we're building together. Last week, Claire's birthday came around. Mitchell asked if we wanted to visit her grave with him. We drove to Oregon together. Stood at her headstone while Mitchell told her about his classes and his internship and how he'd just been accepted into a graduate program. My husband didn't say anything out loud, but I saw him mouth the words, "I'm sorry." On the drive home, Mitchell fell asleep in the back seat. My husband looked at him in the rearview mirror. "I wasted so much time," he said quietly. "You can't get it back, but you can make the most of what's left." He reached over and took my hand. We drove home in silence. Not the angry silence from before, just the comfortable quiet of people who've been through something hard together and survived. When we got home, Mitchell woke up and came inside. Made himself a sandwich like he'd done it 1,000 times before, like he belonged here, because he did. That night, after Mitchell left, my husband and I sat on the couch. He told me he'd been looking at the calendar, counting back. If things had been different, if he'd stayed with Claire, Mitchell would have been born in September, right around the time my husband and I had our first date. Our whole relationship was built on him running from his past, he said. I don't know how to feel about that. I don't either. But we're here now. We can't change where we came from, only where we're going. He pulled me closer, asked if I was happy. I thought about it, really thought about it, about the lies and the betrayal and about Natalie's drunken confession that changed everything, about meeting Mitchell and watching my husband slowly become the person I'd always hoped he could be. I'm getting there, I said, and I was. The next week, Natalie and I finally had lunch. We hadn't spoken much since that day in her office. Things had been too complicated. But now we sat across from each other at the same restaurant where we'd celebrated her promotion 2 years ago. How are you? She asked. Better. How are you? She smiled. Relieved. I was worried I'd ruined your life. You didn't ruin it. You just forced it to change. Still, that wasn't how I wanted to tell you. Drunk and passed out? She laughed. Yeah, not my finest moment. We ordered salads and wine and talked like we used to. About work and life and the mess of being human. She told me she'd been seeing someone new, someone kind, someone who didn't make her feel like she had to be perfect. I told her about Mitchell, about how he'd become part of our lives, about how my husband was trying, really trying. Do you think you'll forgive him? She asked. Eventually. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. No, it's not. We finished our wine and ordered another round. Somewhere between the second and third glass, Natalie asked if I ever thought about what would have happened if she'd never told me. All the time, I said. And I think I would have spent the rest of my life with someone I didn't really know. So even though it hurt, even though it almost destroyed us, I'm glad you told me. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That night, I came home to find my husband and Mitchell in the garage. They were working on an old motorcycle my husband had bought years ago and never finished restoring. Mitchell was handing him tools and asking questions, and my husband was teaching him how engines worked. I watched from the doorway. Neither of them noticed me at first. They were too focused on the bike, on each other. My husband looked up and saw me, smiled. It was different from his usual smile. Lighter, less guarded. I smiled back. Later that night, after Mitchell left, my husband and I got ready for bed. He told me Mitchell wanted to take a road trip over spring break. Asked if it was okay if they went together. Of course it's okay. He nodded, then hesitated. What? I asked. He said something today. About how he wished his mom could see us now. See that we're trying. She probably can. You think? I don't know, but I hope so. We climbed into bed. He turned off the light and pulled me close. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not giving up on me. I didn't respond, just held him tighter. The next morning, I woke up to find my husband already awake, staring at the ceiling. I can't stop thinking about her, he said. Claire? Yeah. About how she raised him alone. How she never asked me for anything. How she died knowing I'd rejected both of them. You can't change that. I know. But I want to do something. To honor her somehow. Like what? He thought for a moment. I want to set up a scholarship. In her name. For single parents trying to go to college. That's a good idea. We spent the next month working on it. My husband contacted the university Claire had attended before she got pregnant. Before she had to drop out to raise Mitchell. We donated enough to fund a full scholarship for one student per year. The Claire Grayson Memorial Scholarship for single parents. When we told Mitchell, he cried. Said his mother would have loved that. Would have been so proud. The first recipient was a 32-year-old woman named Bryn with 2 kids. She sent us a thank you letter that Mitchell read out loud one night at dinner. She wrote about how she'd given up on her dream of becoming a teacher because she couldn't afford tuition while working full-time to support her children. The scholarship changed her life. My husband kept that letter in his wallet. Time kept moving forward. Mitchell finished his sophomore year. My husband and I celebrated our 9th anniversary. We started going to couples therapy, working through the trust issues and the hurt. It was hard. Some sessions left us both raw and exhausted, but we kept going. One night, the therapist asked my husband what he'd learned from all this. He thought for a long time, then said, "I learned that running from your past doesn't make it disappear. It just means you carry it alone, and that weight gets heavier every year until it crushes you." The therapist asked what he'd do differently if he could go back. "Everything," he said. "I'd do everything differently, but you can't go back." "No, so I'm trying to do better now." On Mitchell's 21st birthday, we threw him a party, a real one, with his friends from college and some of his mother's old friends who'd stayed in touch, people who'd known Claire and helped raise him when she was working 3 jobs. One of them, a woman named Valerie, pulled me aside, told me Claire would be happy to see this, to see Mitchell surrounded by people who loved him, to see my husband finally stepping up. I asked if she'd ever been angry at my husband for leaving. "Every single day," she said. But Claire wasn't. She said anger would poison Mitchell and she refused to let that happen. So she chose grace instead. Grace is hard. The hardest thing there is. But she did it anyway. I found my husband later that night. He was sitting on the back porch watching Mitchell and his friends play some drinking game in the yard. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah. Just thinking about how many of these I missed. How many birthdays and holidays and normal Tuesday nights. You're here now. That doesn't erase the time I wasn't. No. But it's better than still being gone." He pulled me down to sit beside him. We watched Mitchell laugh at something his friend said. Watched him be young and happy and whole. "He turned out okay," my husband said quietly. "Despite me. Because of his mother. Yeah. Because of her." We sat in silence until Mitchell called us over to take a group photo. My husband hesitated, but I pulled him up and we joined the crowd. Mitchell put his arm around my husband's shoulders and they smiled at the camera. Later, I'd look at that photo and see the resemblance. The same eyes, the same smile, the same way they both tilted their heads slightly to the left. But I'd also see the difference. Mitchell's smile was open, unguarded. My husband's was tentative, like he was still learning how to be in this moment. Learning how to be someone's father. 6 months later, my period was late. I took 3 tests before I believed them. All positive. I told my husband that night. Watched his face go through a dozen emotions in 10 seconds. Fear, joy, panic, hope. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." He sat down, put his head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "I'm terrified," he said. "Me too. What if I mess this up too?" "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're different now. Because you've spent 2 years learning how to show up. Because you're not running anymore." He stood up and hugged me, held me so tight I could barely breathe. We told Mitchell a few weeks later, over dinner at our house. He'd become a regular fixture by then, stopping by most Sundays, helping my husband work on the motorcycle, watching movies with me when my husband worked late. When we told him, he froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. "Really? Really?" He set down his fork, looked between us. "I'm going to be a brother? Technically, you've been a brother your whole life. I had a younger sister who died when I was 12. But yes, you'll be a big brother to this baby." He smiled. It was my husband's smile. "That's amazing. Congratulations. Thank you. Can I?" He hesitated. "Can I be part of their life? Like actually part of it?" My husband reached across the table. "Of course. If you want to be, I want to be." The pregnancy was harder than the first one. More morning sickness, more exhaustion, but also more hope. My husband came to every appointment, took notes during the ultrasounds, asked a million questions about nutrition and development and what to expect. Mitchell came to one of the ultrasounds too, the one where we found out we were having a girl. He stared at the screen like he was looking at a miracle. On the way out, he asked if we'd chosen a name yet. "Not yet," I said. "Why?" He hesitated. "Would you consider Claire as a middle name?" My husband and I looked at each other. "I'd like that," my husband said. "So would I." We named her Isabel Claire, born on a Thursday in October. 8 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect. Mitchell was at the hospital within an hour of getting the call. He stood outside the nursery window, staring at his baby sister with tears running down his face. When they brought her to the room, he asked if he could hold her. I placed her in his arms and watched him cradle her carefully, like she was made of glass. "Hi, Isabel," he whispered. "I'm your big brother. I'm going to teach you everything. How to ride a bike, how to stand up to bullies, how to fix a motorcycle, everything your dad taught me." My husband was watching from the corner of the room. When Mitchell looked up, their eyes met. "Thank you," my husband said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me another chance." Mitchell smiled, looked back down at Isabel. "You gave me one too." The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, but Mitchell was there. He'd come over after classes and hold Isabel while I napped. He'd walk her around the house singing songs his mother used to sing to him. My husband threw himself into fatherhood with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. He read every parenting book, joined online forums, took a CPR class. He was determined not to miss a single moment. One night I found him standing over Isabel's crib, just watching her sleep. "You're going to wake her," I whispered. "I know. I just can't stop looking at her. She'll still be here in the morning." "I know that too. I just don't want to take it for granted." I understood. He was trying to make up for lost time, trying to be present for this child in a way he hadn't been for Mitchell. When Isabel was 6 months old, we had a family dinner. Mitchell, my husband, me, and Isabel. My husband made pasta. Mitchell brought wine. Isabel sat in her high chair, gnawing on a teething ring and babbling nonsense. Mitchell told us about his classes. He was in his junior year now, thinking about graduate school, considering programs in sustainable architecture. He showed us designs he'd been working on, buildings that generated their own power, homes that adapted to climate change. My husband asked questions, real questions. He was engaged in a way I'd never seen him before, proud in a way he'd earned the right to be. After dinner, Mitchell held Isabel while my husband and I cleaned up. Through the kitchen window, I could see him showing her the stars, pointing up at the sky and telling her the names of constellations. "This is nice," my husband said, drying a plate. "It is. I never thought I'd have this. A family that actually works? We're not perfect. No, but we're trying. That counts for something. It counts for everything." When Mitchell left that night, he hugged us both, kissed Isabel's forehead, promised to be back on Sunday. After he was gone, my husband and I put Isabel to bed, read her a story even though she was too young to understand, sang her a lullaby, watched her drift off to sleep. In the hallway, my husband stopped me. "I love you," he said. "I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you too, even after everything, especially after everything." We went to bed that night tangled together. Outside, Isabel's monitor crackled with the sound of her breathing. Down the street, a dog barked. Somewhere in the distance, a car drove by. Normal sounds, normal life, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.